Tonight, Melbourne on alert as the state races to prepare for a flood emergency. Live reports, special coverage. Also, a police officer accused of secretly filming two women. A promise from the US as Russia launches deadly new attacks on Ukrainian cities. Tears for the victims of terror, the Bali bombings remembered in Kuta and at home. AFL trade deals going down to the deadline, the latest live. And the simple super change that could add hundreds of thousands of dollars to your bottom line.
Live from Melbourne, 7 News with Peter Mitchell starts now.
Good evening. Melbourne is on alert tonight as Victoria races to prepare for days of what's been described as dangerous rain and widespread flooding. We're being warned to expect up to a month's rain in just 6 hours.
In an Essendon car park, sandbags are made by the minute, preparing the defence for a wave of bad weather. The same effort at Chelsea to cover off Melbourne's southeast. Emergency service crews doing what they can now before the real work is expected tomorrow.
I'm worried that it's going to be bad, but I'm hoping that it's not going to be as bad as that.
Between 30 and 60 millimetres of rain is expected in just 6 hours tomorrow night across Melbourne, central, north and northeastern parts of Victoria. Isolated pockets could receive double that. Dights Falls already flowing strongly. Low-lying walkways around the Yarra could go underwater tomorrow, but the danger doesn't end there.
Flooding doesn't just happen in rivers. You know, around Moonee Valley we've got the Moonee Ponds Creek, we've got open drains. All of those will flood, all of those will be moving and all of those will be dangerous, and that's without the water on the roads.
In the high country, a landslide has cut the road between Mount Beauty and Falls Creek. That debris now sits perilously above Bogong Village. There are concerns heavy rain could push it onto houses below.
Could have an impact on Bogong, yeah, for sure.
Up the road, Falls Creek residents had already escaped, many to Mount Beauty.
People have opened up their homes here in Mount Beauty because naturally you'd want to get off the mountain, otherwise you were stuck.
For now, their children have to join classes at the school there.
We've been told for the rest of this week, but we really don't know any more than that.
And damaging winds above 90 kilometres an hour are possible for alpine areas from Thursday afternoon.
For farmers, the next few days are critical. Grain harvest is now underway and stone fruit season is almost here. Farmers north of Melbourne are moving stock to higher ground and dairy farmers are sourcing generators to keep their farms operational if the power goes out. Wet paddocks render heavy machinery almost useless at a time they're needed most.
We're asking people not to travel over the next few days, particularly as the rainfall's coming down. Floodwater's dangerous, we don't want people driving through it.
If you live near potential floodwaters, the SES says preparation is important.
They should have their own kit, they should understand whether their house is at risk or not, and they should have a plan for what should happen if they need to leave.
It's a message delivered across 3 states. New South Wales and Tasmania expect extremely heavy falls too. The rain is holding off for now, but here at Dights Falls in Abbotsford, you can usually see the concrete barrier there. It is well and truly underwater from this fast-flowing Yarra. And downstream, some kayakers making the most of these fairly extreme conditions. Flash flooding can occur up to 6 hours after rainfall, and once a flood peaks, it can take more than 12 hours to recede. St Kevin's College in Toorak closed tomorrow. All 1,400 students told to stay home. Remote learning's back on. That's because the school is close to the Yarra. They've had problems with flooding before, and they worry it could happen again. Peter?
Blake Johnson at Abbotsford, thank you. The north of the state is on edge too, with watch and act flood warnings in place tonight. Tegan Doling is in Wangaratta this evening, and Tegan, it won't take much rain to cause flooding there.
It won't, Mitch, and that's because the river catchments out here are already full. They've had an incredible amount of rain in the last 6 months. So much so there's already an advice and a watch and act warning for most of the catchments along the central and northeast of Victoria. The residents are very well aware of the situation that they are in. They've been down here at the Wangaratta SES throughout the day, filling up with sandbags. They've had utes, they've had trucks down here, and they're taking sandbags away for their own houses, for their businesses, as well as for neighbours, because they're aware that it could get potentially dangerous for them in the next 24 to 48 hours. It's really going to be critical. And we know that the northeast is so dangerous at the moment because of the heavy rain that has already fallen today. The rain really hasn't stopped today, and it is only going to get heavier overnight. For those in the high-risk areas, they've been warned that they should have at least 72 hours of fresh water available in case their houses or their streets get cut off. But the SES have told me today, Mitch, they are prepared and they are ready for an influx of calls over the next 48 hours.
Tegan Doling at Wangaratta, thank you. 7 News meteorologist Jane Bunn joins us now. And Jane, you've got breaking news on when the heavy rain is expected to hit Melbourne.
Absolutely, Mitch. Now, we may actually be hit by it twice. I've just analysed all the latest data coming in from all of the different weather models. Now, they are firming up on not just one, but 2 periods of intense rain. The city and suburbs have the risk of flash flooding early tomorrow morning and then again late afternoon into the evening. Now, that means both commutes tomorrow may bring dangerous conditions on our roads as water is able to suddenly come up. So get the house ready before bed tonight, clear the gutters as we're at risk early tomorrow morning and then again from late in the day, Mitch.
We'll see you a bit later on. Thank you, Jane. A senior police officer is on the wrong side of the law, accused of secretly filming 2 women. Estelle Griepink has the details, and Estelle, the youngest, is just 13 years old.
Mitch, the schoolgirl is preparing to give a victim impact statement about the alleged crime as the case against former Victoria Police Sergeant Simon Lubers continues. Lubers is accused of setting up a secret camera to film the 13-year-old in various states of undress, with prosecutors claiming he stored 3 files from the recording in a secure app on his phone. He's also been accused of filming intimate videos of a different young woman without her knowledge and then sharing those clips with 2 other men. Lubers served 20 years in the force before resigning earlier this year. The 44-year-old will be back in court next week. Mitch?
Estelle Griepink in the newsroom. Thank you. Russia has launched another wave of deadly missile strikes on Ukrainian cities. The US described the attacks as a sign of desperation and promised to provide better air defence systems.
A day after the worst aerial attack since the war began, Volodymyr Zelensky appealed to the leaders of the world's 7 most advanced economies for more advanced air defences.
When Ukraine receives a sufficient quantity of modern and effective systems, the key element of Russia's terror, rocket strikes, will cease to work.
Joe Biden says he'll deliver and added this chilling message.
I'm talking to Putin. He, in fact, cannot continue with impunity to talk about the use of a tactical nuclear weapon as if that's a rational thing to do. The mistakes get made. The miscalculation could occur. No one can be sure what would happen, and it could end in Armageddon.
But for now, the carnage continues. The southeastern city of Zaporizhia pounded almost daily for a fortnight. Today, it was schools and homes.
The Kremlin's attacks were brutal and absolutely unjustified, but they are also signs of weakness and desperation.
Russia boasted of striking Ukraine's energy infrastructure, a key target heading into winter. Here in Lviv, 4 electrical substations have been destroyed in the past 2 days, causing blackouts. There are also issues with water supplies. Moscow intent on causing suffering for civilians to make up for recent losses on the battlefield. Vladimir Putin would rather be feared than laughed at. But even ordinary Russians can see the invasion is badly misjudged. As their president hosted talks with the head of the UN's nuclear watchdog, the UK's biggest spy agency said the cost of his war in equipment and people is staggering.
We know, and Russian military commanders know, that their supplies and munition are running out.
Little comfort, though, for Ukrainians still under siege.
And there's breaking news from Ukraine this evening. Sarah Greenhalgh joins us now from Lviv. And Sarah, there's been a development over Ukraine's presumed bombing of that vital bridge linking Russia to Crimea.
Peter, this evening, Russia's security agency, the FSB, is claiming to have solved the Crimean bridge attack case. It accuses Ukrainian military intelligence of having planned the bombing over several months. They have identified and arrested 8 suspects, including 5 Russians, 3 Ukrainians and an Armenian. That, as the country's foreign minister says, President Putin is open to sitting down with Joe Biden at next month's G20 summit in Indonesia, although that meeting is considered unlikely. Without detailing specifics, the US president has confirmed that contingencies have been gamed out should Russia use a tactical nuclear weapon in this country. Peter?
Sarah Greenhalgh in Ukraine, thank you. The jury in Bruce Lerriman's rape trial has been told Brittany Higgins will return to court on Friday to finish her evidence. The 27-year-old was unavailable today for the 3rd day this week. The court heard from a string of witnesses, including Brittany Higgins' mother, Parliament House security guards and a forensic biologist. The prosecution is expected to close its case early next week. The victims of the Bali terror attacks have been remembered in moving tributes in Kuta and at home. Survivors, families and friends came together, showing that the emotional and physical scars still run deep 20 years on.
Australians, Indonesians. It was Operation Alliance 20 years ago and allied today in grief and the strength they offer each other with speeches that started with a deep breath.
I was granted a second chance at life and I make every minute count.
20 years later, we can say that terror failed.
Ben Walker's young children learnt more today about what Dad did before they were born. He triaged the critically injured at Darwin's RAF base.
It's something that's encompassed my life and shaped my life. Now, I'm really hopeful that today is a turning point, that I'm able to look forward 20 years rather than back 20 years.
Security was tight, with a checkpoint blocking the road to the Australian consulate. For those invited inside, it was a day to honour first responders and volunteers, the friendship of nations, but above all, to honour the 202 victims of the Bali bombings.
You just wonder how they would have lived their lives and just make sure that you're living your best life.
Glenn Cosman was in the Sari Club. His mates' limbs were ripped from their bodies.
Just inside the door, when the bombs went off, when I stood up, there was no one left.
The dress code today, whatever meant something to you. For Rob Stark, it was his Taipei Baboons rugby jersey.
Brought a bit of closure to our team. We lost 5 players in the bomb.
Paul Adams wore his Kingsley Cats shirt. He does so every October 12. The football team lost 7 players on this day 2 decades ago.
There's a shirt we wore 20 years ago. Still the same shirt. I've worn it 20 times now.
After 20 years, a single minute's silence. And words for those who lived to live by.
That I'm bigger than you cannot defeat me, and the most comforting words of all, that this too shall pass.
And Robert Ovadia joins us now from the Sari Club Memorial site. Robert, how will the anniversary be commemorated there?
Hi Peter. Well, so many Australians would recognise what's behind me, that memorial. Locals still call it Ground Zero, and there will be a ceremony in the next hour or so to commemorate this day. You can see just behind me that exquisite floral tribute that was painstakingly put together over the space of 90 minutes or so, quite recently. Now that service about to take place is a multi-faith one. There will be an additional one at 10 p.m. tonight, somewhat less formal, and the request has been made to businesses in this very, very busy area to turn off their lights at that time as a mark of respect.
Robert Ovadia in Bali, thank you. And there have been powerful tributes at home here at Carlton to remember the 22 Victorians killed in the blast.
Here in the city of Melbourne 20 years ago, this memorial was built
and it's become a feature of this park.
And in a national commemoration at Parliament House in Canberra, led by John Howard, the Prime Minister at the time.
You haven't slipped from our thoughts. We understand that the pain continues, but remember that there are a lot of your fellow Australians who feel with you.
Hundreds paid their respects at Sydney's Bali Memorial in Coogee. Tennis Australia is taking extraordinary steps to avoid another Novak Djokovic scandal as the former world number one fights to play in the Australian Open. They've hired immigration specialists but ruled out lobbying the federal government to get him back on the court.
A new Open launched, the same old issue. Novak Djokovic kicked out and banned from Australia for 3 years because of his anti-vaccination stance, now wants to play here in January.
They're going through the process and it's a private matter between him and the government. And of course, if he's allowed to come into Australia, he would love to be here.
To prevent more international embarrassment, Tennis Australia hired immigration specialists to handle all player visas. Will you make any representations to the federal government to get Novak in?
No, we'll keep that as a matter between Novak and Novak's application directly with the government.
Make it 9 for Novak! But they want him.
I think it's important for the Open to have the best players in the world. He's a 9-time champion.
After the Ukraine invasion, Russian players were banned from Wimbledon. They can play here as independents.
They cannot play under a Russian flag. There can be no Russian anthem and no participating in a Russian team.
And the Open has ambitious targets for post-pandemic crowds. Aided by including qualifying week, beefed up with music, kids' days and public practice sessions.
3-week extravaganza, and we're hoping to have at least 900,000 fans through the gate in those 3 weeks.
Nick McCallum, 7 News.
There is just over an hour until the end of the AFL trade period. Abby Gelmy, it's a hectic final day.
It certainly is, Mitch, and there's still a number of deals yet to go through. We have Tom Brown and Mitch Cleary standing by at trade headquarters. And first to you, Mitch, Josh Dunkley, well, he's still yet to find a home.
Well, Abby, there has been some early dialogue over Dunkley, but for now, both parties are standing firm. The Lions offering a first rounder and a second rounder. The Bulldogs still asking for 2 first-round picks for Josh Dunkley. Should that progress, it would give the Dogs the picks to satisfy Fremantle for contracted forward Rory Lobb. The Dockers could in turn then trade for Jaeger O'Meara. The Hawks are prepared to move him. O'Meara's preference is Fremantle over GWS. One other deal to keep an eye on is Lockie Hunter looking to move to Melbourne. And there has been a surprise visitor here tonight. Lions coach Chris Fagan, who remains on formal leave, has spent the night in the Lions bunker downstairs as his recruiters and the other Lions staff get to work in the corporate suites behind us. Abby?
Thank you, Mitch. Now to Tom Brown. And Tom, the Magpies are digging in on a young star.
Abby, a short time ago, senior Collingwood sources told me they don't see how this gets done, this Oliver Henry deal now. Now, the equation's pretty simple. Collingwood could take a stand and get nothing to prove a point and let Henry go as per his wish into the pre-season draft, or take the Cats pick 25, which there's no sign of that improving. They can't improve it. Geelong, Collingwood and Anthony McConville's manager currently locked in talks behind me. There's an hour to go. We'll find out if Collingwood take an historic stand. Meantime, a big discussion point today, Abby, is the go-home factor. Henry, O'Meara, Rankin, Horne-Francis, Bruin and Jackson. There's a lot of stars there. The common denominator, they've all sought trades to go back to their home cities. It's a big discussion point in Clubland. I'll be back shortly in sport.
Tom, Mitch, thank you so much. We'll be back with you a little later as that trade clock continues to tick. We've also got Group 1 glory at Caulfield, and the Matildas have had a win. That's coming up in sport. OK, thanks, Abby. We'll see you then a little bit later. A student has been airlifted to hospital after an explosion at a school. We'll have details next on 7 News. Also coming up, the end of an unwanted era as more COVID rules come to an end. How a MotoGP stunt backfired in the city. The world says goodbye to an entertainment legend. And after sport, David Jones's Burke Street flagship reborn. See the makeover.
A teenage student has been seriously injured in a fuel drum explosion at an East Gippsland school. A CFA crew was first on the scene at Bairnsdale before paramedics treated the boy, who was airlifted to the Royal Children's Hospital. It's believed he suffered serious burns. We are less than 6 hours away from another pandemic milestone. Rochelle Brown has the details. And Rochelle, the last of the COVID rules winds back at midnight.
Mitch, it's a landmark night for all Victorians with the state's pandemic declaration coming to an end. That means the 5-day isolation rules are scrapped for everyone except workers in high-risk settings like aged care and hospitals. It's now only strongly recommended you isolate with COVID, which includes wearing a mask in public. The vaccine mandate goes too, unless you work in healthcare, and masks are no longer recommended in schools.
Does that mean the Victorian pandemic's over?
I think you're probably right. Does that mean COVID is over though? No, COVID is still here, and we ask for people to get tested, act on your symptoms, do everything you can not to make anybody else sick.
Woolworths, Coles and Telstra are among many major companies who will continue to require staff are vaccinated. Mitch?
Rochelle Brown in the city, thank you. Controversial former Liberal MP Jeff Shaw is making a return to politics. He'll lead Clive Palmer's United Australia Party in November's state election.
Now, I know there's many Labor voters who are sick of Dan Andrews. They don't want to vote for him, but they're not going to be voting for the Libs. But I'm calling out to you today that we want you with us, with the United Australia Party.
Mr Shaw faced an expenses scandal and was suspended from Parliament during his last stint on Spring Street. The United Australia Party plans to stand candidates in all 8 upper house seats. A pedestrian has been killed by a truck at Footscray at the corner of Moreland and Parker Streets just after 10 o'clock this morning. The 58-year-old truck driver stopped and is helping police with their investigation. Detectives are still searching for witnesses. The entertainment world is paying tribute to Angela Lansbury, remembered for her work across 8 decades. The 96-year-old British star of Murder, She Wrote enjoyed success on TV, the stage and the silver screen.
Of all the roles she played, it was this Sunday night fixture as Jessica Fletcher, a mystery writer and amateur detective, that earned Angela Lansbury a cult following.
Well, one of you adolescents, please tell me what's happening.
Murder, She Wrote lasted 12 seasons, just one chapter in a career as long as it was varied.
Life is war. Don't count the casualties.
Born in London in 1925, Lansbury and her family left during the Blitz and moved to America, earning back-to-back Oscar nominations for Gaslight and The Picture of Dorian Gray, then bursting back onto Broadway in the 60s and 70s.
I'm not like Mame at all, but I love playing her, because for the first time in my life, I was admired as a woman.
In 2013, Australian audiences got to see her close up.
How came to see me? Not you.
When she brought Driving Miss Daisy down under with the equally brilliant James Earl Jones. And in 1991,
cheer up, child.
A new generation of fans fell in love with her as Mrs. Potts in Disney's Beauty and the Beast. Angela Lansbury's family said she died peacefully in her sleep, 5 days shy of her 97th birthday.
Beauty and the Beast.
In Los Angeles, Ashley Mullaney, 7 News.
Vale Angela Lansbury. A publicity stunt for this weekend's Australian MotoGP has backfired. A smoking burnout from local star Jack Miller prompted the evacuation of a city restaurant and the apartments above. Firefighters were called to ACDC Lane. The MotoGP is back at Phillip Island for the first time in 3 years. Victorians are being warned to watch out for Hot Wheels, stolen and now being sold here to unsuspecting buyers. What to look out for is next on 7 News. Also coming up, the hunt for a dangerous Bayside firebug. See the touching farewell to boxing legend Johnny Famechon. And NASA claims success in a space mission to defend planet Earth. Detectives are hunting a serial firebug in the St Kilda area. Police believe up to 5 fires are linked, including this one on October the 2nd, where wheelie bins were pushed up against a car and set alight. A number of cars and apartment buildings have been damaged in the fires, but no one has been injured. Police are warning Victorian bargain hunters about heavily discounted motorbikes being sold online. Almost $700,000 worth was stolen from shipping containers, sparking an operation to smash the crime syndicate.
52 stolen dirt bikes smuggled out of a Sydney holding yard bound for Melbourne. Police are convinced it was an inside job.
We believe it's an organised crime syndicate, quite sophisticated to be able to get the bikes in the state and then ship them down to Victoria. So we believe that there's that connection through the two states.
They found dozens of the bikes being sold online via Gumtree and Facebook Marketplace for half price. 11 more were seized in raids across Melbourne, some still in their boxes. Victorian police officers pounced on addresses in Tarneet, Williams Landing and Williamstown North, arresting 2 men.
Quite brazen, 4 or 5 are still outstanding. They're quite distinctive.
Police are now warning online buyers to be alert for these Honda dirt bikes.
They're approximately around $13,000, but they've been advertised for much less, around the $4,000 or $5,000 mark, which is a good indication that something's happening.
The 2 alleged ringleaders have been charged with handling stolen goods and possessing a drug of dependence. Cassie Zervos, 7 News.
The date has been set for the coronation of King Charles. He'll be crowned alongside his Queen Consort Camilla on May the 6th next year at Westminster Abbey. Buckingham Palace says the ceremony will look towards the future while being steeped in tradition.
We must retain the pageantry. It, apart from anything else, will be a television spectacular, will it not?
At 74, King Charles will be the oldest new monarch to be crowned. And NASA has confirmed it changed the path of an asteroid by hitting it with a spacecraft. The mission was a test to see if it could be done to defend Earth. The space agency says it's the first time humanity has altered the motion of a celestial body. Boxing great Johnny Famechon was remembered as a humble legend during his state memorial service last night. Famo died in August at the age of 77, having battled a major brain injury for 3 decades.
He made this hall his own House of Stoush, the man who called himself poetry and motion in a brutal sport.
When I watch his fights, I'm in awe at just how magnificent he really was in the ring. He's simply beautiful to watch.
The State Memorial played highlights of his upset, historic 1969 victory in London. World champ at just 23.
Famechon has won the World Featherweight Championship.
I was just obsessed with boxing from that time onwards.
250,000 people lined the streets of Melbourne to welcome him home. But such adoration never changed him.
Absolute gentleman, had time for everybody, and it's something that I loved about him dearly.
In 1991, he was hit by a car while jogging. Then, more than ever, he needed his boxer's tenacity.
But John, being so strong, pulled through against the odds. But it was touch and go.
But behind that sheer determination, always an endearing, cheeky sense of humour.
Johnny will never be forgotten. He's in our hearts forever. Rest in peace, legend.
Nick McCallum, 7 News.
We're being told there's a simple way to collect an extra $245,000 in super. Experts explain next on 7 News. Also a confession over a $6 million South Melbourne fire. A man under police guard after a deadly crash in Melbourne's east. And after sport, see inside David Jones's $50 million makeover on a flagship store. A 30-year-old man has pleaded guilty to starting a $6 million fire in South Melbourne. The blaze in a warehouse sparked a major emergency response in May last year, spreading smoke across several suburbs. Jaden Tune will be back in court in February. A woman has been killed and a man is under police guard in hospital after a car crash at Glen Waverley. The Holden ute left the road and ran into a tree. Residents gave first aid to the driver and the passenger, but a 35-year-old woman from Wanturna died in hospital. A 45-year-old man from Dandenong North suffered serious injuries and remains in the Alfred Hospital. The share market has flatlined after a bumpy day. Network Finance editor Gemma Acton has more.
Thanks, Peter. On a day when the ASX 200 couldn't decide whether to rise or fall, it ultimately ended flat at 6,648 points. Banks were today's big winners, with the Bank of Queensland lifting 10% on strong results. The Aussie dollar is still stuck at 2.5-year lows, around 62.7 US cents, while oil and iron ore both continue to fall thanks to global growth concerns. And the traditionally male-dominated construction industry is slowly changing. 10% of construction managers are now female, up from 7% in 2016. But just 1% of many other skilled trade roles are held by women. Peter.
Thanks, Gemma. The Victorian Liberal Party's top lawyer has quit. Chandra Lloyd says it's because senior figures turned a blind eye to alleged criminal behaviour.
We have lots of lawyers in the party, and if there's any issues, that's a matter for the Secretariat and the State Director to manage.
Ms Lloyd's resignation follows the exit of Chief of Staff Mitch Catlin in the wake of a donor scandal. Australians are paying a high price for setting and forgetting their superannuation. New research has revealed how a small change can make a major difference to the bottom line.
An extra $245,000 in retirement sounds appetising. And according to the team behind the annual Fat Cat report, it's as easy as changing super funds.
Fees are the biggest determinant of whether you're going to have a good result or not.
The report compared 5-year returns after fees and costs are taken out across 500 super funds. The best performing fund was Qantas Super, followed by UniSuper and Hester, and taking out the bronze, Australian Super and IOOF. The worst performer was OnePath. Colonial First stayed a close second, with AMP and Clearview bringing up the rear.
Unfortunately, it's the same funds that keep on performing poorly year after year after year.
That extra $250,000? It's the difference between annual fees of 1.5% and 0.5%.
So it does mean a lot in retirement. That could be 10 round-the-world trips in first class that you could be enjoying.
With super returns set to be lower this year as share markets struggle, fees matter more than ever.
Over that long term, we've seen that return of around 7 to 8% per annum from super. I think it's probably pretty challenging right now to see that sort of pathway.
Changing super funds is easy. Go to the MyGov website, log in, select super, and then follow the prompts to switch. Or simply contact the fund you want to move to, and they'll do the paperwork. Gemma Acton, 7 News.
The clock's ticking to the AFL trade deadline. Abby Gelmy, we're inside the final hour.
Certainly are, Mitch, and the future of at least half a dozen stars are still up in the air. We'll cross live the AFL trading room next for a hectic final few minutes. Also, the key to unlocking Tom Mitchell's move to Collingwood. Star Tigers turn tour guides to welcome a giant recruit to Punt Road. And the mighty Matildas waltz to victory in Europe. Welcome back. Tonight's 7:30 trade deadline is closing in fast. Tom Brown and Mitch Cleary have every angle covered. First to you, Tom. The deal on Rory Lobb will go right down to the wire.
It will, Abby. Good evening. Now, Jager O'Meara was choosing between the Fremantle and GWS. He's opted with Fremantle. There's a bit to go on that deal, and provided that goes through, Rory Lobb should get through at the last minute to the Bulldogs. He bought his house in Melbourne. He should get his wish right on the close of trade period. Now, the Bombers have landed Wiedemann. Francis went to Sydney. Shaki went to the Demons in a three-way deal in the end. Adrian Dodoro from the Bombers spoke and was asked whether the Essendon uncertainty has impacted their trade period. This was his rather frank response.
I'm leaving early, so and look, we set out to get a big body mid. We achieved that. We've got Sam in the door, but we wanted to keep our picks.
Part of those discussions are with
Abby, just finally, St Kilda defending their trade period. It's been reasonably quiet. They think their improvement will come from within.
Thank you, Tom. Now to Mitch Cleary. Mitch, a Brownlow medalist is expected to land at the Magpies.
Well, Abby, Tom Mitchell is sitting by his phone in the USA tonight, waiting to find out if he get his wish to head to Collingwood. So far, Hawthorn is still demanding Collingwood's pick 27, but any significant movement on this deal is being held up, given the Hawks are still dealing for Jaguar O'Meara out to Fremantle. Another man waiting to find out whether he gets a new home is Asava Radaglia from Geelong. The Cats asking for more than the Port Adelaide's pick 33. This deal, well and truly, still up in the air.
Obviously, the longer it goes on, it's looking less likely than likely, but we're still hopeful. Obviously, we put what we have to Geelong, and they've got a little bit of time to work out whether they want it or not.
It's two, yeah.
Now, a deal has just been made official. That is Western Bulldogs Premiership player Lockie Hunter making his way to Melbourne. He has 2 years left on his deal at the Kennel. The Dogs are expected to pay some of that deal to get his move over to Melbourne, a future third-round pick heading back to the Dogs. Just as we enter the final hour of the trade period, one name to keep an eye on is Hunter Clark and whether he gets his wish to head to North Melbourne. Abby?
Thank you, Mitch. Richmond superstar Dustin Martin turned tour guide to help lure Jacob Hopper to Tigerland. The former Giants midfielder met some of his new teammates today, but it was playing alongside Dusty that had the most appeal.
No, Dusty's been brilliant. He was very good when I had my walkthrough, so he's been great. So it was great to haven't really spoken much to Dusty, so it was great to just to hear from him.
Hopper has signed a 7-year deal. Kieran Maher's 2 Caulfield Cup runners have fared well at tonight's barrier draw, with favourite Smoke and Romans to jump from gate 5. Today's 1,000 Guineas was an exciting entree as superstar jockey James McDonald and champion trainer Chris Waller combined for Group 1 glory.
Led clearly, Madame Pomery streaking to the line, won the 1,000 Guineas. Revolutionary missed second.
Chris has had a lot of faith in this filly, and that's hence why he brought her down, and he asked me to come down, and he said it'd be very hard to beat here.
He's on fire, J-Mac. Meanwhile, the contingent of overseas raiders has arrived for the Melbourne Cup, including hot favourite Deauville Legend from the UK. The Matildas finished their 2-game European tour with their best display in 12 months. After falling behind just 47 seconds into their clash with Denmark, the Aussies fought back to win 3-1. Katrina Gorry netting a long-range stunner.
What a strike! And the Matildas are in front. And it's a wonder goal from the Wonder Mum.
Caitlin Ford scored a double in the Matildas' first win over a top 20 ranked team since October last year. The final piece of the puzzle has been completed for golf's Australian Open here in Melbourne in December. World number 3, Minjee Lee, has confirmed she will play as the men and women compete at the same time. She joins fellow big names Cameron Smith, Mark Leishman and her brother, Min Woo. Some families are too talented. Sister and brother both competing in an Oz Open, not bad.
Exactly. That should be a great event, actually.
It should be. I love that the men and women compete at the same time.
Looking forward to that. Thank you very much indeed, Abby. A $50 million makeover of one of Melbourne's most iconic department stores is now complete. David Jones's Bourke Street flagship wants to be seen as a luxury destination to lure shoppers away from their laptops and into the store.
The future of retail under one roof.
We want to bring a completely new look and feel to the CBD of Melbourne.
A world-class assortment of high-end brands spanning 5 floors of the Bourke Street store. From personalised styling suites to a bar, the improved David Jones store is all about the experience.
We've actually got the first Louis Vuitton pop-up in the world. And on the ground floor, we've got a new world-class luxury sunglass offer. We've started on the 3rd floor with our new luxury women's wear and accessories offer. We've got a true shoe heaven there.
It really strongly signals confidence in retail in Melbourne.
The 4th and 5th floors are now dedicated to menswear after the separate store closed in July. The $50 million revamp has taken 3 years and hopefully will be worth it. Before the pandemic, about 9 million customers came through the doors here at David Jones every year. The department store now hoping to lure even more customers back despite the online shopping boom.
For us, retail is a fundamental part of our city economy. This is going to help us drive more foot traffic and more spending.
Sarah Jones, 7 News.
Jane Barn is next with the all-important forecast. And Jane, what's the latest on the rain?
Well, Mitch, Melbourne may actually see 2 periods of intense rainfall tomorrow, and that brings the risk of flash flooding. I'll have the full details next.
Tonight on the latest from 7 News, why a trip to the US is costing you even more, and it has nothing to do with flight prices. The threat of terror in Bali 20 years on. The Foreign Minister at the time joins us. And fair go for disabled taxi passengers, the advocate demanding change after an appalling experience. When it breaks, we'll have it live for you, 10:50.
Know the headlines as they break. Know the stories as they happen. With 7news.com.au, know the news now. Victoria braced for a weather emergency. On standby for a flood alert.
We'll have special live coverage
from across the state.
Plus, the expert insight from 7 News meteorologist Jane Barn. Everything you need to know. 7 News with Peter Mitchell at 6.
Hello again. Today was just the beginning. Rainfall rates are set to intensify just after midnight in a widespread way here in Victoria. We have a big day on the way tomorrow. There are areas of rain over western and central parts of the state, including Melbourne, generally producing 1 millimetre or 2 each hour. However, there are localised pockets of heavy rain, and that is a precursor to the widespread activity tomorrow. Now, these pockets are seeing 20 to 40 millimetres in just a short time. In Melbourne, it did begin raining a few hours earlier than forecast. And while there are occasional breaks out there, we can expect the fairly steady millimetre or 2 an hour to continue tonight and tomorrow. The city has had 12 millimetres, Heathmont 18, but Melton just 2. The west missed the rain during the morning. The intense falls are likely to increase. Watch the widespread yellow and orange develop in the early hours of tomorrow. No more 1 to 2. That is falls of 5 to 10 millimetres an hour. The intense rain is a risk in Melbourne early tomorrow morning and then again tomorrow night. The intense rain brings the risk of flash flooding in these areas. There's also damaging winds, but they're only up in the Alps. The rest of the state are just gusty. Here's why there is so much fuss. Moist air from the tropics is being funneled down into a cold front. That front is slow moving, so the intense rain lasts for longer and has more of an impact. The far southwest and far southeast of the state, they miss the heaviest rain. Some of the south may only see 30 millimetres in total. But anything here that is orangey red, so much of the state, has the potential for 50 to 100 millimetres. Now, all that water has to go somewhere. Dams are full, some overflowing, rivers already up thanks to the recent rain. We have minor to major flooding likely from later this week. These rain systems keep coming too. We'll have river flooding risk for months. Around the nation tomorrow, mostly dry in Brisbane and Sydney, rain developing later in Canberra. 10 to 15 millimetres in both Hobart and Adelaide. It's sunny over in Perth. To Victoria, wet. This is the big day. Widespread rain. Heavy falls likely as intense rain develops and then sets in for several hours. Finally easing the west at night as it turns cold there. Closer in, the yellow shows the potential for intense rain. That's early tomorrow morning, then steady regular rain during the day, then the potential for further intense rain. That's late afternoon and in the evening. So under that, the temperature, it literally doesn't move. It is 16. Then there is a cold change coming in at night. All up, the Melbourne area could see 30 to 70 millimetres. The October average is 66. The rain is all over in the early hours of Friday morning. We'll have a dry break during the morning on Friday. Then it's back to regular Melbourne programming. No more humidity humidity and a burst of showers coming through. That's late Friday morning and Friday afternoon, a more regular top of 17. It dries up on Friday night. After that, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, there's just the odd bit of instability around here. But after we go through those parts, have a look at next week, Tuesday and Wednesday. Sunshine, bright sunshine and some much warmer temperatures. So there is the risk of intense rain leading to flash flooding. That's early tomorrow morning and then later in the day into the evening. In between, it is certainly wet. We've got steady rain tomorrow, Mitch.
A low and a top of 16. Firstly, that's very rare.
It is very rare. You've just got that thick cloud overhead and the rain falling continuously.
And we'll all be looking forward to that 25 in a few days' time.
Exactly. The middle of next week, bright sunshine. 25 sounds almost impossible.
Yeah, and it might dry up a bit of the rain too.
Indeed.
Thank you very much indeed, Jane. Now here's what's on Sunrise tomorrow.
Thanks, Mitch. Tomorrow on Sunrise, the home loan refinance rush.
How to get the best deal and save thousands. See you in the morning, Melbourne, with our exclusive report.
And that's the way it is this Wednesday, the 12th of October. Thanks for your company. For now, from the 7 News team, good night.